Welcome to the Divine Worth podcast, where we are letting go of our self-doubt, anxiety, fear, and limiting beliefs so that we can step into the divine roles that God has for us. I am your host, life coach Karen Pappen, and together we are embracing our divine worth and potential. Welcome to the Divine Worth podcast. Our guest, her name is Dr. Trina Boice. She is a university professor, author of 35 books, professional author coach, film critic at the Movie Review Mom YouTube channel and website, and mom of 4 awesome sons. Her oldest son invented the LDS dating app called Mutual after he and Trina wrote a dating book together. How fun. Well, Trina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation. I'm so honored.
Well, I look forward to hearing about your journey because it sounds pretty amazing just from what I've seen so far. So to begin, one thing I would like to ask you is, it says you're a university professor. What do you teach?
So I've been teaching for BYU Idaho online for about 15 years, and they've moved me around to different departments, which I think is fun because I love variety. So over the years, I've taught religion classes, which is awesome, of course, but communications, life skills, math, believe it or not. Luckily, a lot of those assignments were auto-graded. Let's see, what else? Did I say communications? That was a fun department. And right now I'm teaching a personal health and wellness class. And then I also teach for a college in Tennessee called South College, and I'm teaching a management class for them.
Wow. So like a lot of different things over the years.
Yeah, I've got degrees in a bunch of random different things. And so they know they can pull me around to different departments. And I have fun in any department teaching any class, really. I've taught at other colleges as well. For example, Le Cordon Bleu. Of course, the students loved it when we were in the kitchen and they hated it when we were in the academic classrooms, So I was teaching a politics and government class. So I'm thinking, okay, how can we get back in the kitchen? And so I'm like, okay, what food did Thomas Jefferson invent? Do you know? Do you know the answer?
No, I don't.
He loved going to France, but he did spend some time in Italy, but he loved going to France and the sauces and the cheeses. And so he brought home an idea to make macaroni and cheese. So if the students could guess it was mac and cheese, then off to the kitchen we would go. And I had the best mac and cheese balls that one group of students made. I put them in teams. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. And let's see, what other fun classes have I taught over the years? I taught a lot of English classes. I taught at a nursing college when I lived in Las Vegas. I just recently moved to Utah. And it was hilarious because those nursing students are really unique. If we talked about ooey gooey dripping body parts, it wouldn't faze them at all.
Yeah.
Because they're nursing students. And I would always say, you guys know you're really unique, right? Because that kind of stuff doesn't faze you. Whereas if I said, in an English class, those icky body parts and words and blood and guts and stuff like that, most students would be like, oh,
Yeah.
that was kind of entertaining.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I love teaching. As soon as I learn something, my first thought is, who can I teach that to?
Oh, that's great. Okay, so that is so interesting. So you kind of it sounds like you've been on quite the journey. So I would love to hear your divine worth story, how you have seen God's love and belief for you in your life.
And that's such a sweet question. And you have such a sweet show because it's all about identity. If we know who we are and whose we are, it gives meaning and purpose in our life. And it's sad to see so many people out there in the world don't know and they flounder and they are looking for something that will give them meaning and purpose and understanding of their divine nature. So thank you for having this show. I think it's really needed in the world today. There have been many times in my life where I felt a heavenly hug. And there's no other way to describe that, where oftentimes it's when I'm reading the scriptures or studying. And I remember being at BYU as a student, and I was just in this classroom with this guy I was dating. And somehow we ended up in this classroom and we were both doing homework, we were studying, and I was doing an academic subject. It wasn't for a religion class. And then just all of a sudden, I must have been thinking about trying to connect that academic topic to things that I had been learning at church, maybe. And that was probably the first time I really remember feeling that. No, that's not true. I did feel it before. That feeling that just a warm embrace, like just a blanket of warmth and love. And it brought me to tears. And this boyfriend, kind of looks at me. He's like, "Are you okay?" Because he was studying math, or I don't know, whatever he was studying. The first time I felt that, as I was saying, I think that was the first time. The true first time that I really remember feeling that unconditional love and that heavenly hug was when I was out in nature. And if you're ever looking for that connection, nature is a great place to be. Go on hikes and connect. And it was in a grove of trees. And as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a grove of trees has special connotation for us. And I kind of wanted to have a magical moment. And I remember looking around, to see if anybody was looking at me or nearby because I wanted to speak out loud as well in my prayer. And just instantly, it was this warm hug where, again, I felt God saying, "I know you, I see you." And I was asking him, "What is truth?" And he never forget. He said, Trina. He called me by name. And we read that in the scriptures often when he says the name of somebody. So he said, Trina, you've always known. And I immediately was like, you're right, you're right. I
Yeah.
know the things that are true because they hit me in my soul and my heart and my whole body. As I was growing up, I prayed like a young girl, what should I do? I think one of the things that I've always done in my life is I do have just a prayer, a beginning and end of a prayer, but most of the time I wake up and I start talking to God, and it's sort of a never ending prayer. It's open ended. And I'm sure he's like, okay, are we wrapping this up, and so things will happen throughout the day. And then I'm like, oh yeah. And remember the thing. And I want to do this. And then my mind goes off into something else. And then I'll come back an hour later and keep talking. And anyway, and so I remember as this little girl being in the garage, and I was just exploring and looking at all my parents' stuff, which sounds kind of weird, I guess. I don't know. Kids are weird. So I was in the garage and I'm just looking at stuff, and I picked up this 3x5 index card box, a little metal one that my dad had. And I don't know why he didn't have it in his office, but it was in the garage for some reason. And so I opened it up, and inside were a bunch of quotes that he had written, and he had beautiful penmanship. And so they were just inspirational quotes. And I was like, oh, these are so cool. And all of a sudden, I got this download again from heaven saying, you're going to be an author. You should start collecting quotes and stories. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. And I thought that was a neat idea. I didn't know what I was going to write as an author, but I knew at that moment I was going to be an author, and I was excited about that. So I began adding little 3x5 cards to this box until it was full. And then I created the same thing, but in a shoe box until that was full. And then I started getting big boxes and then filing cabinets. And at one point in my marriage, I had probably 12 filing cabinets. This is, old school, pre-digital stuff, and where I kept paper copies of quotes and stories and inspirational things. And years, decades later, I have an inspirational quotes podcast. It's short. It's not like your show where I interview guests. I simply share a quote, talk about who wrote that quote, some ideas about it, and then some challenges so that the listeners have practical application. How do you apply this principle in your life? And it's very, very short, but I just thought I've just always been obsessed with inspirational quotes. And then, of course, as I got older, I started writing books, and they have just been on a variety of subjects. All of my books are nonfiction because, again, I have this didactic personality where I want to learn and then I want to teach. And so that's kind of how my books are. And so some of them are Christian, mainstream Christian. Some of them are geared more towards members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And some of them are just mainstream. And they range from, like, mainstream example would be mystery shopping. Do you know what mystery shopping is?
No, I don't.
No? It's super fun. I've been doing it for decades since I got married. One day my husband said, "What's your dream job?" And I said, "Where people would pay me to spend money." And we both laughed. And then turns out that's actually a job. That's mystery shopping. And so some people do it full time. I've always just done it for fun on the side. And what it is companies pay you to act like a normal customer, but in reality, you're evaluating cleanliness, customer
Mhm.
service, merchandising, product setup. If it's a restaurant, food quality and taste. Those were my funnest assignments because basically that paid for date night. So the company pays for
Yeah,
dinner
yeah,
and it pays you to write up the report. It's an awesome side hustle. And so I've done it when my husband and I first got married. We lived in Georgia. So I did it many years there. And then we moved back to California. We're both from California. And then in Nevada, we lived in Las Vegas for many years. And little side note, in Nevada, in order to do mystery shopping, you have to have a private investigator's license. So I actually have one. And then moved to Utah. So I haven't done it in Utah yet, but I'm still setting up the house and stuff. So once I get settled, I'll start taking assignments. But anyway, so it's a lot of fun. So I wrote a book about it and shared my experiences and tips on how to get started, where to get assignments, how to do assignments well. So they keep giving you assignments, all of that kind of stuff. And just how all of that works. And then I turned that book into an online course as well.
yeah.
So that's one example of mainstream.
This is so fun talking to you. Like, you are
Aw.
fascinating. I have this dream of, of just, like, continually going to school and getting degrees or different certifications or just, like, constantly improving my mind in some way or another, and then, the same thing, sharing what I learned too. So it's fun talking to you because of that, because I'm just like, "Oh, this is so similar to what I wanna do."
Have you written a book yet?
I wrote a book called Super C Kids, and so it's raising kids to be confident and courageous and compassionate and connected. So I
Awesome.
did that, 2020. I did that in 2020. So, because my kids struggle with anxiety, they're very much like I was when I was a kid. It's pretty much just like a collection of things that have helped my kids. So, yeah, so I've done that, and then I'm currently writing another book called From Burden to Beloved, and I'm co-authoring that with a really amazing person. Okay, so getting back on topic and where we were, Trina, one of the things that you were going into was you were telling us about your latest book for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So let's go ahead and hear more about that and kind of how that came to be.
Well, let's see. How about before we do that one, I'll tell you about another mainstream one that's related to divine worth.
That would be great.
And then we
Yeah.
can do the religious stuff. Another example of a mainstream book, for mainstream just means everybody, is a book that I wrote with my twin sister called What the Mirror Doesn't Tell You. And then what did we call it? The Wonder Within. That I was trying to think of the subtitle. And she's a nurse practitioner. And so we thought it would be really neat, especially to help women understand their amazing bodies, because honestly, really struggle with divine worth or any worth for that matter, a lot more than men do. And although the book is great for anybody, but it really is geared towards women. And so the book talks about different body parts and what they do and how miraculous they are. So we're looking at body systems and anatomical approach kind of, but just to remind women, look at this incredible miraculous body that you have and all of the incredible things that are happening inside your body. And of course, the mirror doesn't tell you any of that. Well, I should backtrack a tiny bit. You can look in the mirror, and if something is going wrong with one of those body systems, it can actually manifest in, you know, skin diseases or the lack of glow, or, I mean, to some extent, how you're taking care of your body is revealed from what's going on in the outside. But for the majority of times, your body is incredible. I keep using the word incredible, don't I? And your mirror is simply a glass. It's just glass. It doesn't know you. It doesn't know your heart. It doesn't know your divine worth. It doesn't know how kind you are or the service you've given or any of those things, right? And a, a lot of times we judge ourselves and our value based on what we're seeing in the mirror. And that is only part of the story of the wholeness of who a woman is. And so, anyway, the book goes into all of that, and it's very sweet. It's just a reminder to women and young girls of all ages, really, to appreciate what's happening inside your body physically, but also spiritually, emotionally. The whole book is a celebration of self care and ideas of how to take care of yourself inside and out. And there are so many beautiful stories. Every chapter has at least one true story of amazing people, men and women, and how they were able to recognize their worth and really how that changed their lives and how they were then able to also be a blessing to others. Sometimes women were so focused on giving and serving and helping other people that we forget to reflect that back to ourselves and be kind to ourselves. The book talks about negative self-talk and how mean we can be to ourselves. You think we say things to ourselves that, first of all, aren't true oftentimes, but things that we would never say to our girlfriend or anybody, really. And so why are we so mean? Watched this podcast on YouTube the other day, and it was just saying your brain is kind of crazy. It makes things up. Don't believe the dumb, stupid, untrue things that it says. Why it does that, I don't know. And I was hoping they were going to explain anatomically why is your brain making things up, that it tells you. And then, of course, why do we believe it? Anyway, so we talk about a lot of that kind of stuff in the book. So that's another example of mainstream. And I've got lots of other ones. And the dating book that you mentioned that my son and I wrote together and how that spun off into the mutual dating app. And so you never know where a book can go. So examples of my LDS books. Do you want me to tell you about a few of those?
Well, first, I would like to ask you some questions because you were talking about this book that you wrote with your twin and something else about you. That's so fun. So I'm curious though, like what are some of the tips or tools that you mentioned in that book that help to be able to overcome these negative thoughts that we end up like beating ourselves up?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's mindset. Accepting the fact that the mirror does not tell you the full truth and the full story about yourself. We live in such a shallow world where what is on the outside is everything and it doesn't reveal everything. And so when you first have to believe that there is more to you than just this. Now, that's not to say that you got to let all of this go because it does matter in today's world, but it's not the full story. And so once you accept that and you accept the fact that you do have divine worth, that there's so much more in your soul. At some point, we're all going to lose this physical body when we die, but we are going to continue to live on. Our spirit is going to continue to live on. And it's that spirit that is what we're trying to work on in this life. I mean, we have to learn how to work on the physical body, exercising and eating well and all of that basic stuff. And the book goes into a lot of the physical stuff too. But you know, when as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe we lived before we came to this mortal experience. We lived in a spirit body, in a spirit form. And two of the big reasons why we came to earth were to learn how to use a physical body because our heavenly father has one and we wanted to be like him, and he gave us this wonderful opportunity as a school to learn how to use this body and to marry it with the spirit. And then the other reason is to learn how to grow characteristics, qualities that are truly Christ-like in this life. And so when we do lay down that body for a time, because I believe we will be resurrected and be reunited with the same body, but a glorified, better one, which I'm looking forward to, um, that we've got to work on this spirit. And so there are exercises on how to do both things, not physical exercises, although some, but I think another shift in the mindset is, there are a lot of exercises like positive affirmations, and they have been popular for decades. You know what positive affirmations are? It's the first thing that most people suggest because it sounds good, you say these sentences out loud, and often if you use an I am sentence, it triggers your brain to believe it. I always say I am fit and trim and healthy and strong, and then I look in the mirror and I laugh, like, okay, yeah, that's not happening yet. I am wealthy, I am, you know smart, whatever. And I don't know how effective they are. For me, they mostly make me laugh because I know the reality, but I also know that our brain can believe things that we tell it. If we constantly repeat negative things about ourselves, then I think the brain goes, "Oh, that might be true," which they're probably not. Another exercise is tapping. Do you know what tapping is?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have talked with many people who say and swear that it works for them, which is great. So tapping, there are certain points, on your body that you're tapping while you're saying positive statements. And I've tried all of that. And I don't know that it necessarily works for me. But again, I know people who've said it dramatically changed their lives. So we throw out a lot of ideas and suggestions because my attitude when I write my books, because I told you they're all nonfiction, is I love to share a brainstorm of ideas and then encourage you to try one or two or all of them and see which ones work for you. Everybody is different and every body is different. And so we have lists of, every chapter has homework assignments. Try this, and this. Maybe this one will work. Maybe this one won't, but that's okay. Keep trying. I have a list here in my drawer on my desk of, I call them elevation. In fact, when we were talking earlier, my Alexa went off and reminded me to do squats. Actually, we weren't filming
Yeah.
before when we were talking. And so she reminds me every day at 1 o'clock, when usually everybody gets in that afternoon slump, to look at my list of energy elevators. So picture a ladder, and at the very bottom, the ladder is how to raise your vibrational level of energy. Everything has a vibration, everything is energy. And so at the very bottom would be despair, which is even beyond depression or anxiety, where you've just given up completely. And it is a dark, dark, lonely feeling. And I have been there before. And then at the very top, what do you think would be the very highest rung on that ladder? What would you say for the highest frequency?
Well, the phrase that comes to my mind is self-actualization. Or being in your true divine self.
Yeah, and the way to get there, the highest level on that energy frequency is gratitude. You have joy because you're so grateful for the smallest thing. It could be big things too, but
Mhm.
when you're able to get to that level of gratitude, it changes everything. And sometimes it's hard to get there. And so you can find these vibrational energy levels kind of even as triangles online. You can look for some of those. Anyway, they're all over. And so I have them in each layer or level on that ladder. Each rung works me up to that highest level of joy and gratitude.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I like at 1 o'clock when Alexa reminds me, I'm like, okay, where am I on that ladder? And I might just be in the thick of working. And so I'm productive, but I might not necessarily be inspired. If I'm writing a book, for example, I need to be on a higher frequency in order to write things that are inspirational, right? And so there are all kinds of physical exercises that move your energy up. And I always forget what they are, and so I've got a file, an old school paper that reminds me, okay, try this exercise. Sometimes it doesn't work, so then I try the next one, and then the next one, and then eventually, I level up. But the simplest exercise is to listen to music. Music is so powerful and energizing. And praying, of course, helps. Writing lists of things you're grateful for helps. And I've got all of these lists, paper versions as well as on my computer. Remember, you're grateful for this thing. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Or I have a list of things that I love. And just thinking about the things that I love pull me up a little level on that rung. Like, I love kittens, I love waterfalls, I love flowers, and just thinking about those things, I'm like, oh, I love that. They have actually studied the brain and found that when you listen to birds, that you level up. And what's amazing is your brain can't distinguish between a real bird or one that you listen to on YouTube. And so I have certain channels on YouTube where it's nature sounds with birds chirping, and I'll have that playing in the background while I'm working on stuff, and it just makes me happy. I mean, it's such a simple thing. Of course, if you could go outside and listen to real birds, that absolutely helps. In the book with my twin sister, we have learned over many years of experience that when people have depression, which is very low on that energy, or anxiety, those two often go together. The very first thing that you need to do is look at your physical health. What is happening with your body? Are you eating well? Are you nourishing your body with good, clean food? Or are you just eating junk all day? That affects your spirit. It affects your attitude, your perspective, everything. Are you exercising? Movement is energy. Years ago, for about 10 years, I used to teach water aerobics. And so when I was first getting certified, my instructor said, movement is the celebration of life. And I thought, oh, I like that quote, move. And I'm not saying lift weights or, jog for 25 miles, whatever, any movement. It could be dancing. It could be sitting in your swivel chair, which I am right now, and rocking, whatever. Move, stand up, walk. And he said, but there's a second part to that quote. And I was like, oh no, what? And he said, when pain is the reminder that you're alive. I'm like, "That's so true," especially at my age when my husband and I, we'll wake up damaged, and we're like, "What the heck? We were just sleeping. We were literally doing nothing, and now we woke up and you got a kink in your neck or your back hurts." I'm like, "I was laying there. How can I be hurt?" Anyway, so somehow get movement. Those 2 things that and I've talked with I actually created an online course called Managing Health Wellness what did I call it? Managing Depression and Anxiety for Your Health and Wellness or something like that. And so I talked with a lot of therapists and every single one of them when I said, "What is the first thing you tell people who are depressed or have anxiety or just have reached that lowest level of despair even?" And the first thing they said always was, "Look at your physical health." So our bodies and our minds are absolutely connected. In this class that I'm currently teaching for BYUI on personal health and wellness, it's all about teaching these young students that you've got to have balance and you've got to address every area of who you are. I put them in 7 categories. You probably do too. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? I'm doing all the talking. You want to tell everybody what the different areas of wellness are or wholeness of being?
But they have, like, the wheel of life.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
have you shared
yeah,
that with your audience before? Tell them
you
what
know
it
what?
'cause that's a
I
really
haven't. To be honest, I have a different perspective on it. I think it's great for, like, looking at where your time is, However, there's different quality. And so it's like most of my time is in my family category. However, that doesn't mean that it's good quality time. So you kind of need to add this element to it. It's like, okay, it helps you know where you're spending your time, but take it a step further and be like, but is that quality time? And how can you make it more quality time?
Yeah, I love that. And it also depends too on what phase of life you're in. I mean, you are in the thick of raising your family. My youngest son is still at home living with us. So we're not over it, although you're never over raising your kids. You know, I've got adult kids and that takes a lot of work too to raise them. But the categories that I put in for wellness and wholeness are they all end with O: physical, spiritual, intellectual, mental, emotional, social, financial. Did I get them all? All.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And to
makes
the
sense.
wheel of life that you were talking about is a visual tool where you draw a circle and then you make little pie cuts, so each area represents those physical, spiritual, emotional, all of those. And then you're supposed to color in, starting at the center point of the pie, color in how you think you're doing in that one aspect of your life. And so after you finish that, some would be high, some might be a little lower. And
Yeah,
I think that that's helpful. I've used that in coaching to have people look at their complete wellness and what the story is. But again, it doesn't tell the full story because you may be having to spend more time with your family because you're in that phase of life. Whereas I get to do some things on my own and have those fulfill me. And then the grandbabies come and visit, and so then I'm all in on the family mode. I don't know. But it depends. You have to give yourself some grace as you're looking at all of those things. But when I was raising my kids when they were very little, we had something that I called M&M time, which is grammatically incorrect because I told my kids it stands for me and mom, or even mom and me, right? And we would eat peanut M&Ms, and I made sure they knew that I was grammatically incorrect, by the way. But we ate M&Ms because so here's the deal. I have 4 boys, and every Sunday I wanted them to talk about their goals. How are you doing in school? How are you doing financially, physically, emotionally? They're boys. They were like, yeah, they would never take it seriously. And so, I could never get them to go to bed on time either. So one day I noticed I was in bed eating M&Ms. This sounds terrible. At night they were supposed to be in bed, and one by one they kept coming into the room on my bed, and they just were very excited about talking. And I'm like, all right, I'm on to you guys because of course I wanted them to share their feelings. They knew
yeah,
that if they did, they could stay up longer. So all of a sudden at night, they were really interested and open and sharing and stuff. Of course, the snacks were an added perk. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to work with that. And so we had some time, got a little binder out, and we would put papers in each section of physical wellness, emotional, spiritual, all of that. And so we would go through the little book one at a time. We would sit on my bed eating M&Ms, and we would go through each of these categories.
yeah.
And it worked. They laughed and made fun of me, but they did it. They were in because they got to stay up late and eat M&Ms.
Okay, so I I love that what you're telling me. I'm just like by the end of the day, I'm like so tired and yet that is like the time that your kids open up to you. And
It
so
is.
it's like a big like mindset shift that I need to make and have been trying to make that it's like this is the best time to talk to my kids. So anyways, so that's a fun way of doing it,
Right.
the
Because
time.
I wanted to do it when they got home from school. How was your day? Let's do this. And they
Yeah.
were tired. They didn't want to talk about school. They finally got out of school. So it
Yeah.
took a while for me to figure out that was sort of the golden hour for them, at least. And you're like, "Oh, but they need to be in bed at a certain time." Whatever, that building that relationship, if it only can happen at night, so be it.
Yeah.
Whatever. I always heard that, grandparents are so wise. And now that I am one, I don't know how wise I am, but I definitely see that there's a different perspective because I have 4 sons. 2 of them are married with kids so far. And so I see that especially one of my sons gets frustrated and overwhelmed with parenting and, is he doing the right thing or should he do this instead? Or how does he handle it when when his son has a little meltdown or I have a granddaughter who's very emotional. So we're always trying to figure out how do we handle, these little meltdowns and stuff. So I see my sons kind of stress out about, how do I do this? It's so important. And now, as a grandmother with perspective, I look back and I just think, so much of that stuff is not as important as you think it is.
Yeah.
Like it's important to have a good routine and a bedtime. But again, if that's when they're willing to talk to you, so be it. It's okay. And you're not going to damage them for life if they go to bed a half an hour later? And so I keep telling my sons, it's okay. A mantra I've learned over the years is whatever, which probably doesn't sound like a powerful mantra. But for me, it was when I finally adopted that as my personal mantra. Because I think women especially, we like to control things. They need to be a certain way. We're just kind of built that way. Or maybe I'm just talking about myself, but yeah, I think I was a lot more controlling. And if things weren't just right, it would really get to me. And now I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. There are things that absolutely do matter, but a
Yeah.
lot of the little stuff, it just doesn't. And don't get so angry because I would get angry with my kids. And I stopped and asked myself, why is anger the emotion? And I realized it's because I felt like I didn't have control over things or people. They should be doing this thing, or acting this way.
Yeah.
And you have to accept the fact everybody has free agency, doggone it. And it's okay if things aren't exactly the way that you want them. And I think I'm a pretty chill grandma now. But I think a lot of grandmothers are that way because they've learned that a lot of that stuff just it's not as big as you think it is. Focus on the things that are truly big. And one of the big things is belief in God. And I have two sons that have really struggled with that. For me, that's a big thing. And I have other girlfriends whose kids are pulling away from God. That's big. And yet, we're only looking at a finite time right now in our life or right now, even in mortality. And we're like, they need to know God is real right now. And I've relaxed a lot as well. Like they're going to figure it out. Life is going to teach them some things. I've taught them. They know what I believe. It breaks my heart if they don't believe what I believe, but that also is okay. Ultimately, they're Heavenly Father's children, and they were before they were mine. I'm kind of a mortal babysitter. That sounds weird. But what I mean, and he's gonna be there. He's in charge of them, not me. I just have been commanded to love and show them what Christ-like love looks like and feels like, and the rest of it will work itself out. They're gonna get there. They're gonna figure it out, I think. And so that has helped me to not be so uptight or angry or even hurt as much. To just know God loves you whether you believe in him or not. You do have divine worth. And whatever you do, your worth doesn't change in the eyes of God. He loves you unconditionally. And as a mom, I'm supposed to do the same thing, love my kids unconditionally, because the reality is we all make mistakes. We all mess up. We all make dumb choices. And that doesn't change your worth. There's no point at which God says, all right, you crossed the line, one too many mistakes, no redemption for you. Like there is no number of mistakes you're allowed to make that will cause you to not have worth anymore in the eyes of God. And as a mom, I should be the same because I hope that I receive that same treatment from God and from others, that I'm trying to figure it out too.
I love that. You know how people do like a word of the year or I guess mine isn't just one word. It's let go. And I'm finding since I decided that that it's so applicable in so many different ways. And it's like
Yeah,
you just need to let things go. And I mean, really, it's all about, for me, the reason why I chose it was to just put my faith and trust in the Lord and focus on just the next right step.
exactly.
Because that's really all that really matters, is that you're just doing the next right step, whatever that may be. And sometimes that's working on my business, sometimes that's being with my kids, or with my husband, or in my calling, whatever it is. But if we're constantly striving to develop that relationship with our Heavenly Father and put our trust in Him, then it's like He will let us know what the next right step is. And so I need to just let go of everything else and focus on that next step.
That's so good. That's such a powerful lesson. Do you ever watch or listen to Mel Robbins' podcast?
I've heard it a few times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really great. She's a real practical, down to earth gal, and I love her for that. But she recently wrote a book called Let Them.
Yeah.
And as a mom, you probably know where that book is going. I mean, I'm not saying let your kids go run wild, you got to train them and teach them and all of that. But especially as they get older and they make really bad choices, let them. It's their life ultimately. Uh, and that's hard to do as moms
Yeah.
because we see their potential. We want the best for them, obviously. So I love that. I love that that's your word. My word this year is intentional. Be more intentional about all of my goals. I want to be fit and trim and healthy and strong. And that's kind of been one of my goals forever. But am I intentionally including that in my daily efforts, in my daily routines and habits? Yeah, just be intentional. What do I really, really want to happen? And that kind of thing.
Well, Trina, I do want to hear more about your newest book. So, do you have time, and would you like to go
Yeah.
ahead and share?
An author always has time to talk about her newest book. I'll tell you about my two newest ones. So the first one, I don't know if you can see that. If I hold that up to the camera,
Yes.
can you see that?
Yeah.
So, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, this year we're studying the Old Testament as a church wide, which is so fun that we're all having the same conversation about a book of scriptures. And so this year it's Old Testament. And so to gear up for it, I wrote this book called The Language of Heaven, which is a title that ancient rabbis called the language of Hebrew. And so the subtitle is Hebrew words every Latter-day Saint should know to better understand the Bible, covenants, and God. And so the reason why I wrote this book is I think Hebrew is fascinating. I've taught gospel doctrine Sunday school classes for years. And the very first time I taught the New Testament, I was like, wait a minute, I need to really better understand the Old Testament because what happens in the New Testament is a fulfillment of prophecies that happened in the Old Testament. And I went to a bunch of different Judaica stores where they sell Jewish stuff, like menorahs and lamps and all this stuff. And I was so fascinated. I had this, where did I? Oh, I put it in my Jewish Sunday school bag. Anyway, other little things. And I was so fascinated. And I started studying Hebrew and Judaism and worked with some rabbis. And a whole new world of layers of understanding and insights just opened up. So when we understand Hebrew words and how they've been often translated in English that often strips them of deeper understanding, I thought we need to learn some of these Hebrew words and have them just be a part of our gospel study. And so, anyway, that's what that book is about. I think it's really cool. Obviously it's designed so that there will be one Hebrew word every week of the year. So during this whole year of Old Testament study, you can learn it as a family. There are little activities and homework assignments and stories and how to pronounce the words and all of that kind of stuff in each chapter. So it's supposed to help families really see Jesus Christ, Jehovah, in the Old Testament. He is everywhere and often embedded in these little Hebrew words.
What is there a particular word, Hebrew word, that you think of when you think of divine worth?
Yeah, let me tell you about a word. That's such a great question. The first word that comes to my mind is Gaal. And what it means is a kinsman redeemer. So you can see lots of stories in the Old Testament where somebody got in trouble and they needed their brother to pay the bill. Like they went into debt and they owe somebody a bunch of money. And so a kinsman, an actual relative, would go and pay the bill and then say, okay, we're good, right? And then the two of them could work out who was going to ultimately pay that bill, pay, would the guy pay off his brother or his uncle or whoever it was. We see it in marriages as well when a husband is married to a woman, and for example, the husband dies. She now is required to marry the brother. We see stories of that, and vice versa. Marry the wife, marry, depending on who died. It's very much a family affair of protecting that family, keeping everyone whole. Within that word, it kind of says all of those things. Um, so whether it's a financial debt or the marriage or the death of somebody, it's trying to redeem that person who is in a bit of trouble. And in fact, for years, for 15 years, I lived in Georgia. All of my boys were born in Georgia. They're official Georgia peaches. But in the state of Georgia, they actually use the word in a legal sense, not because there's Judaism in Georgia. They just adapted this word into their legal system. So when somebody in the family is in trouble, they'll take the family members to court. Anyway, it's a whole thing, which I just find fascinating. Now, if we look at Jesus Christ as our brother, he literally is that kinsman redeemer. He knows we are family. We've been studying the creation in Genesis in the Old Testament so far. It's January, right? Out of all of the incredible, amazing creations, only one creation God calls family, and that's us. We're his children. Jesus Christ is our brother, and we're in trouble in this mortal life because we sin. And no unclean thing can enter God's presence. So, how do we get clean again? Through the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. We can repent and be forgiven and be baptized, right? And that's what a kinsman redeemer does. He brings us back to that wholeness so that we can try again. And every Sunday when we partake of the sacrament, it's that kinsman redeemer moment where we're reflecting on the atonement, literally eating bread and drinking water, thinking of the body and the blood that was shed for us because we are so valuable. We're family. If that doesn't speak to divine worth, right? I don't know what it is. And I don't know that oftentimes when any Christians partake of the sacrament, as we call it, or the Eucharist in, Catholicism, for example, are we really reflecting on how he's redeeming us every single week and paying that eternal price for sin? I think that's a really cool word, Gaal.
Yeah,
You like
that's
that
so
one?
good. Yeah, I do. I like that one.
This is a book that came out last Easter. It's called Via Dolorosa. Have you ever heard that term before?
Mm-mm.
So Via Dolorosa in Latin and Spanish, Portuguese, Romance languages, it literally means the sorrowing path, the painful way. And what it refers to, you can see on the cover, is that path that Jesus Christ literally walked through Jerusalem from condemnation to crucifixion. Condemnation when he was at Pontius Pilate's praetorium, where finally Pontius Pilate washed his hands and said, all right, what do you people want to do with Jesus? And they said, crucify him. And he's like, all right, game on. And so then he had the crown placed on him and he was carrying the cross literally through the streets of Jerusalem until he got to where Golgotha or Calvary in Jerusalem technically was outside the current walls. So it's a path that winds through the city. And today, Christians make pilgrimages to Jerusalem to walk this path, what they believe is the path. And over the centuries, the path has changed a little bit. Originally, it was there are 14 stations or stops along this path. It's about a 2-mile-ish path through the city. So Emperor Constantine's mother became Christian, and she wanted to go to Jerusalem and find all of the sites that she believed were where Christ lived and walked and taught and did various things. So she was the first one that identified some of these spots. And the Catholic Church predominantly owns and maintains some of these sites. In almost every site along this path are churches that honor what happened. And 9 out of the 14 are actually in the scriptures. They're in the Bible. We know they happened. Sometimes we do know exactly where they happened, and sometimes not so much. And the other ones are based on tradition, and some written tradition passed down. But either way, whether they are the actual, authentic, legitimate site or close enough by, walking this path helps us really reflect on those last hours of Christ's life and what he did for us, because he is that Gaal. He is that kinsman redeemer. He loved us so much. He was willing to die a brutal death, and those last hours were horrible. So this book walks you through each of the stations. If you go to Jerusalem, you can use it as a guidebook. It'll tell you literally, turn left at this shop, look for this sign, and this is the thing, and. But if you
Yeah.
don't go to Israel, then you can feel like you went by reading this book. And so the book, like all of my books, has homework at the end of each chapter. Gives you ideas as a family how you could sort of reenact each of these stations. There are 14. So if you led up to Easter every day, reading one chapter and thinking about the things that happened in that station, that area, reading scriptures, reading the hymns that go along with what happened, all of that kind of stuff. It makes for a really special Easter celebration. And it'll give you some really neat ideas on things that you can do with your family as you really focus on the Savior. So those are my 2 most recent books.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I have just a couple more questions that I usually ask people. So the first one is, what is your favorite divine word scripture?
I have a few. When I was a young girl, for some reason, Matthew 25:40 jumped out. And it's the context, or the content is repeated in Mosiah chapter 2, verse 17, which is, when ye are in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God. Everything we do to each other is as if we were doing it to God. That's pretty powerful. If you're not motivated to help other people, then think about God. But when you become more Christ-like, you want to help other people, because that's what he did. And so I've tried to live a life of service. That one is really powerful, because every soul is worth something. We all have divine worth. That's in D&C, Doctrine and Covenants, section 18, where we learned how the worth of every soul is great. And when we're helping that soul, that's not just, we're opening the door for somebody. We're helping that person have a better day, letting them know that somebody saw them and that they deserve respect and kindness. That's huge. That's one little drop in their little bucket of self-worth, to feel like, wow, somebody thought I was important enough. They opened the door for me. That's so nice. So I really like those.
Yeah, those are great. Okay, so what is one small and simple thing that those listening can do to embrace their worth?
I think that when you catch yourself speaking harshly or negatively to yourself, just pause and replace that garbage thought with, I am a child of God, and my worth does not change today, no matter what dumb things I do. Well, that's the end of the sentence, but ideas, no matter whatever you do that day or don't do, you still have divine worth. Do not let your brain wallow in the garbage that you tell yourself. And it's not true. Be kind And you don't have to journal. You don't have to have a long life overhaul in that moment. You don't even have to pray. You just pause and replace the negative thought with something really great. I think we struggle when we don't believe we have divine worth. And every day there are multiple things that can cause you to believe that you don't. So just replace it because it's true. You have divine worth. And watch great inspiring shows like this one on either on YouTube or listen to it on podcast. Change the garbage that you're listening to. If you're doing the doom scrolling, I have so many BYU students that are like, okay, I need to stop doom scrolling. Yeah, you're right. You do. It doesn't help you in any way. Instead, replace it with 5 minutes on Duolingo, where you're learning a language. And then you've accomplished something for the day and you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Doom scrolling is not good.
Yeah. 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 And a lot of times, even if you are following it's all inspirational content. Like even then you can still, it can still affect your worth and how you feel about yourself. Because you're not going out and taking action, but also it's just like a comparison can come in. And so it's just like, take a break, recenter yourself, connect with God. That's going to bring you
Yeah,
closer.
really analyze what you're consuming, physically, of course, but spiritually, what are you consuming all day long? I think the younger generations have the highest rate of depression and anxiety because they're the ones that are living on their cell phone and they're consuming stuff that does not make them feel good about themselves. I mean, we older ones too, we get on our cell phones, but it's different. They grew up with that technology. They don't know how to live without it, you know?
Yeah.
And as parents, we can help show them options, show them how to replace those things with things that'll make them feel better about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, Trina, this has been awesome. My last question is, how can those listening connect with you?
Well, I'm everywhere on social media as Trina Boice, trinaboice.com or trinasbooks.com, or I'm also everywhere as Movie Review Mom. We didn't even talk about movies. I'm obsessed with movies, and so I do movie reviews on Movie Review Mom. But you can find me. I mean, Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, Twitter. I'm all over the place. So it's not hard to find me. And you can find all of my books on Amazon for sure. And then you can find many of them at bookstores, some mainstream, but a lot of Latter-day Saint bookstores.
Awesome. Well, Trina, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so fun talking to you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you have found this podcast to be a light, please share it with others and leave a review, which helps others to be able to find the podcast as well. To learn more about your divine worth and potential, you can check out my Divine Worth Scripture Study Journal with over 52 scriptures relating to your divine worth and potential. You can find that on Amazon by searching Divine Worth Journal by Karen Papin or through the link in the show notes. You are of worth. You have a purpose. The Lord loves you, and He believes in you, and only you can make the impact on this world that you are meant to make. Join me next time as we talk more about divine worth and potential.